What's happening in Cuba right now is a crisis, and our hearts and prayers go out to the people in Cuba protesting against their dictator communist regime. This brings us to the next issue, which is the U.S. immigration policies towards Cuba. I'm here to explain wet foot, dry foot. The term wet foot, dry foot was coined during the Clinton administration. And basically what it is that when a Cuban comes to U.S. waters, they have met the requirement of the wet part. When they have reached U.S. land, they have met the requirement of the dry part. Now, pursuant to the Cuban Adjustment Act, when a Cuban made it to the wet part or the dry part, they would then be paroled into the United States and have to wait 1 year and 1 day to apply for their lawful permanent resident status through the Cuban Adjustment Act. During the Clinton administration, he removed the wet foot policy part of the wet foot, dry foot. So if a Cuban came to U.S. waters, they would be intercepted and returned back to Cuba. However, if they made it to the dry part, the dry foot part, they would be then paroled and then able to apply for their lawful permanent residency within 1 year, 1 day in the U.S. The Obama administration removed the dry part. So then if you were Cuban and you came to the US and you made it through, let's say, the US-Mexican border and you were in the dry part, you were no longer paroled to then get that benefit of the Cuban Adjustment Act. You were then either allowed to come to the United States, but not given that first initial document that would give you the right to make the application for the green card benefit through the Cuban Adjustment Act. When the Obama administration removed the dry foot, since wet foot was already removed, it was the end of the wet foot, dry foot policy completely. This has resulted from 2017 until the present of Cubans coming to the United States, making the dry foot portion, entering either through Mexico, presenting themselves, but not being paroled, and therefore they're going through the asylum process and are not given a parole document to then get their resident status. Prior to 2017, the dry foot policy was in place so that Cubans who arrived to the US border through land were then paroled and then had to wait 1 year and a day to apply for their residency. After 2017, Cubans who have attempted to enter are either deported back to Cuba, which they have accepted them, or the Cuban asks for fear of return back to Cuba, and then that Cuban is placed through the asylum process. Right now, we're in a situation that if there is a mass Cuban migration coming to the United States, they either run the risk of being deported back to Cuba, or if they claim asylum in fear of return back to Cuba, they are going to be placed into what's called removal proceedings, and they are going to be able to fight their claim in front of an immigration judge. This has to do with the type of encounter that would happen between United States immigration law enforcement and the applicant who is trying to enter the United States, which in this situation would be a Cuban trying to flee Cuba in fear of persecution. There's a lot of talk about what's going on right now, and our job is to help explain to you what the policies and procedures are in place. We're hoping that the Biden administration takes these next steps and possibly allows for TPS for Cuba. There's also a reinstatement of the wet foot, dry foot policy that would help the Cuban people. Right now, we have heard no word other than if Cubans decide to come to the U.S., they will sadly be returned to Cuba. So we're hoping that the administration takes a broader look at the ramifications of what's going on with the Cuban people and does the right thing to help them out. We hope that this video explained what the immigration situation is going on with Cuban nationals. And if you have any questions or concerns, always feel free to give us a call, 954-589-1180.